The fan in the corner squeaked with every turn, stirring hot air across the small, dimly lit room. The cracked walls bore the stains of years of struggle, and the smell of boiled beans hung in the air. Maria sat quietly on a worn couch, her knees drawn up, her cracked phone cradled in her hand. Her eyes, once quick to shine, were heavy now, haunted. Just a few feet away, her father sat motionless in his wheelchair. His shoulders were still broad, a ghost of the strong man he once was, but his legs were useless now, folded under a blanket that could not warm his pride. Maria's gaze lingered on him. Each time she looked at his face, at the softness that masked years of sacrifice, guilt clawed at her chest. This was the man who had once rushed into the street to push her out of the path of a speeding car. He had saved her life that day but lost the use of his legs forever. Since then, her world had unraveled. Medical bills devoured their savings, and prayers went unanswered. The doctor's words echoed in her mind, stabbing her like knives. "If he doesn't have this surgery, your father may never stand again." Maria pressed her cracked phone to her forehead, her other hand tightening around the fabric of her worn skirt. She scrolled through endless classifieds late into the night. House cleaning jobs, babysitting offers, anything that could bring in money. But it was never enough. She already skipped meals, washing clothes for neighbors to afford medicine. She stayed awake tutoring children in the evenings, her voice steady even when her stomach growled with emptiness. And still, it was never enough. Her mother's voice, sharp and unforgiving, rang in her ears. "Maria, if you don't find money, your father will die in that chair. Do you want that on your head?" Her throat tightened as she watched her father. His eyes, kind and weary, followed her movements. He never complained, but the silence was worse than words. She wanted to scream, to tear down the walls, to beg the universe to give her a chance. Instead, she sat in silence, phone in hand, scrolling. Always scrolling. The following morning, Maria trudged along the sun-baked campus corridor, her head bent low. She barely noticed the laughter of her classmates or the energy that buzzed through the university grounds. She was trapped in her own thoughts, her father's face flashing in her mind like a haunting picture she couldn't put away. Then something caught her eye. On the notice board crowded with tattered ads for used phones and tutoring services, one flyer stood bold. Egg donors needed immediate settlement, 100,000. Her heart stilled. 100,000. The number glared back at her like salvation. It wasn't enough for the entire surgery, but it could cover the deposit. Hands trembling, she pulled out her phone and dialed. Her pulse hammered as she pressed each digit. In her nervousness, she pressed 4 instead of 5. The line connected. "Hello?" A deep male voice answered, calm but sharp, surprised. Maria's throat tightened. "Hello, please. Is this the egg donation people? The ones offering 100,000? Her voice was small, hopeful, almost breaking. Silence stretched on the other end. The man's breath caught, his jaw clenched as if something inside him twisted. Why would such a young girl? His mind raced, then settled. "Yes," he said quietly. "Come to Round Garden, Building 6, Room B." Maria's chest heaved. Relief flooded her veins, chasing away her doubt. Without thinking, she scribbled the address into her notebook. Round Garden stood tall, its gates sleek and buzzing open with a sharp click. The compound smelled faintly of disinfectant, its walls too clean, its silence almost unnatural. Maria's sandals tapped against glossy tiles as she climbed the stairs, her small handbag clutched against her chest like armor. At Room B, she paused. Her palms were slick, her stomach heavy with nerves. Then she knocked. The door opened slightly. The same voice called, "Come in!" Inside, the air smelled of cologne laced with something sterile, almost medicinal. The room gleamed. White walls, shining floor, blinds drawn tight against the sun. By the window stood a tall man in a fitted shirt, his phone in hand. He turned slowly, his eyes locking on hers. Maria's breath caught. He was striking. Broad shoulders, angular jaw, gray eyes sharp as blades. Yet his gaze on her was unreadable, like he was weighing her on an invisible scale. "So," he said flatly, his voice smooth, detached. "You want the arrangement?" Maria nodded nervously, her voice a whisper. I I saw an ad about selling eggs. I need the money." His eyes flickered, surprise hidden beneath control. He had expected greed, maybe shamelessness. Instead, what he saw was desperation. Her innocence cut at him, but his face revealed nothing. "Are you a virgin?" His tone was flat, clinical. Maria froze, the words slamming into her. "Sir, what does my virginity have to do with my eggs?" He leaned closer, his presence suffocating. "If you want this, there are requirements. Take off your clothes. I need to check. If I don't check, how can I be sure?" Her chest heaved. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Fear curled its fingers around her throat. I can't do that. I'm sorry. I think I made a mistake." She reached for the door handle. It didn't budge. The sharp click of a button echoed, and the lock snapped shut. Maria's breath came in short, sharp gasps. She turned, panic flooding her veins. The man stood calmly, his expression cold, unshaken. "Too late to regret it now," he said quietly, his voice a calm blade. "You came here for money. Be serious." Tears blurred her vision. Her hands shook as she gripped her handbag tighter. "Please, sir, open the door. I don't want this anymore. Please." The silence that followed was unbearable. The air conditioner hummed above, mocking her fear. She saw her father's face in her mind, his tired smile, his trembling hands. A hot tear rolled down her cheek. "I was wrong," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please let me go." The man's eyes lingered on her, his jaw tight. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he sighed, his face hardening. He pressed the button again. The lock clicked. "Get out." Maria didn't wait. She stumbled into the corridor, her legs trembling. The air outside rushed against her skin, cool and freeing. She hurried down the stairs, hugging herself as though she could hold her breaking heart together. Outside, the compound seemed brighter, but she felt darker inside. Behind the locked door, Lawrence leaned against the wall, jaw clenched. His chest rose and fell as he replayed her face in his mind. The fear, the innocence, the desperation. He hadn't meant to terrify her, yet he knew it was the only way. He whispered under his breath, almost like a prayer. "Don't do something foolish, girl. Don't sell your body. Don't sell your eggs. It will ruin you." Maria walked home that evening, her hands trembling, her eyes dry from crying too much. The money still haunted her. 100,000 had dangled in front of her like rescue, but now it felt like a pit. When she pushed open the crooked wooden door of her house, her mother's sharp voice greeted her instantly. "Maria, where is the money? We need 50,000 first, or your father will rot in that chair." Maria lowered her head, her chest aching. "Mama, I'm still trying." Her mother's eyes blazed. "Trying doesn't feed anyone. Johnson just got a job chance. They need a referral fee. 60,000. Bring it, or don't come back to this house." Maria's lips trembled, but no words came. She glanced at her father, but he stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. Her heart cracked. For her family, money was everything. For her, it was survival. And for the first time, she wondered how much she would lose before she was destroyed completely. The hotel lobby shimmered under golden light, every chandelier dripping with crystal like frozen rain. Marble floors stretched endlessly, polished so clean Maria could see the reflection of her own trembling steps. She had never entered a place like this before. Her simple, faded dress clung awkwardly to her frame, making her feel like a shadow in a world of glass and silk. Clutching her small handbag tightly, she followed the directions Lawrence had texted. Each step toward the elevator felt heavier, as if her feet wanted to turn back, but her heart, and desperation, dragged her forward. Her stomach knotted with fear, but in the pit of that fear was a dangerous flicker of curiosity. Who was this man, really? The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and she stepped inside, pressing the button for the top floor. Her reflection in the mirrored walls stared back at her, eyes wide, lips pressed tight, posture shrinking against the weight of what she was about to do. When the elevator doors opened again, the hallway was quiet, lined with thick carpets that muted her footsteps. She found the suite number and hesitated, her hand hovering over the door. She almost turned away. Almost, but then she knocked. The door opened. Lawrence stood there, tall and composed in a crisp white shirt that fit across his broad shoulders, like it had been sewn for him alone. His piercing gray eyes locked on hers instantly. Maria's breath hitched. Those eyes, unreadable, steady, yet dangerous, pulled something from her chest she couldn't name. "Come in," he said softly. The suite was breathtaking. Warm, golden light filled the space, glowing off chandeliers and gilded decor. A king-size bed stood neatly made in the center, white linen crisp as snow. Velvet curtains framed tall windows that revealed the glittering city lights of Lagos outside. Maria stood frozen just inside the door, her faded dress and worn shoes mocking her in the opulence of the room. Lawrence closed the door behind her with a soft click, the sound echoing louder in her mind than it should. He stepped closer, his presence filling the air like gravity itself. "You're shaking," he said calmly, his eyes scanning her face. Maria's voice cracked. She clutched her handbag tighter. "I shouldn't be here. Yet here you are." His tone was low, not mocking, but it left no room for escape. She swallowed hard. "I only came because you needed money," he finished for her, his voice cutting through her fumbling words. His jaw tightened briefly. "Always money." Her cheeks burned. She lowered her eyes, ashamed, yet too desperate to walk out. Her father's face haunted her every thought, and her mother's sharp voice echoed in her ears. Lawrence stepped closer, so close she could smell the faint cologne on his shirt. Rich, sharp, intoxicating. He lifted a hand as though to brush her cheek, but stopped short, his fingers hovering in the air. "If you're nervous," he said quietly, "you can leave. I won't stop you." Maria blinked, startled. For a moment she saw a softness in his eyes, a crack in the marble. But before she could respond, the silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Something inside her gave way, a reckless, desperate part of her that longed for escape, for release from the weight she carried every day. Slowly she stepped closer. Her lips parted as she whispered, "I don't want to leave." Then before fear could stop her, she kissed him. The contact was clumsy, trembling, but real. Her hands shook against his chest as if her body wasn't sure what it was doing. Lawrence froze for a moment, his entire body stiffening. Then, slowly, he returned the kiss. His hands moved to her back, steady and controlled, pulling her gently closer. The world outside disappeared. The chandeliers, the velvet curtains, the marble floors, all of it blurred into nothing. There was only his touch and her trembling breath. He lifted her carefully, as though she might break, and carried her to the bed. Every second felt unreal to Maria. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought he might hear it echoing in the room. Fear clashed with shame, but beneath both was a dangerous yearning she couldn't deny. Lawrence's movements were careful, patient, almost tender, so unlike the coldness she had expected from him. His eyes softened when he noticed her inexperience, his pace slowing as if he refused to overwhelm her. For Maria, it was both terrifying and strangely gentle. When the night finally surrendered to silence, she lay curled on the bed, staring at the ceiling, her body trembling with the weight of what she had given away. Lawrence's steady breathing filled the room beside her, but Maria's chest ached. Her father's face returned to her mind, her mother's words, the desperation that had led her here. Sleep eluded her. Dawn broke quietly. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, painting the suite in soft gold. The city below stirred awake, the sound of distant cars muffled by glass. Maria sat at the edge of the bed, her head bowed, her hands twisting in her lap. Her faded dress was back on her shoulders, her hair falling around her face in loose waves. Shame clung to her like a second skin. She didn't dare look back at him. She didn't know if she could bear the expression on his face, whether it would be disgust, pity, or worse, indifference. Lawrence moved behind her, silent. She heard the faint rustle of his wallet opening. When she finally glanced back, her breath caught. In his hand was a neat bundle of cash. 200,000 naira, twice what she had whispered she needed. He extended it toward her calmly, his eyes steady. "Take it," he said quietly. "Not because of what happened. Just take it." Maria's hands trembled violently as she accepted the money. The weight of it burned in her palms. She whispered a shaky, "Thank you," her eyes fixed firmly on the floor. For him, it seemed simple. For her, it was everything. She rose, clutching the bundle against her chest, her body heavy with shame. When she reached the door, she paused for a heartbeat, her back to him. She wanted to say something, to explain, to confess the storm in her chest, but no words came. She opened the door and stepped into the bright hallway. The cool morning air from the open lobby windows rushed against her skin like judgment. She hugged the money to her chest as though it could protect her, but nothing could erase the question pounding inside her mind. What have I done? When Maria returned home, her mother's eyes lit up at the sight of the bundle. She snatched it quickly, flipping through the notes with a satisfied smile. "Good," her mother said simply, her voice dripping with greed. "Finally." Maria stared at her in silence, her chest tightening. Not a single question. Not a single concern for where the money had come from. Just relief that more notes had entered the house. Her father looked at her from his chair, his expression unreadable. His lips pressed as though he wanted to speak, but he said nothing. Maria bowed her head and walked to her room, her fingers trembling as she shut the door. She collapsed on her bed, clutching her pillow, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. She had crossed a line she could never return from. And though Lawrence's touch had been gentle, though his money had saved her father for now, the shame weighed heavier than gold. The music pounded like a living thing, heavy bass shaking the floor of Crystal Lounge as neon lights slashed across smoke-filled air. Wealthy men in suits sprawled at VIP tables, glasses of champagne glinting under strobe lights. The room smelled of expensive liquor, perfume, and danger. Maria's hands trembled as she balanced a tray of half-empty glasses, her black waitress dress clinging tightly against her frame. The club had provided it, short, sleeveless, far too revealing for her comfort. She walked carefully between tables, her eyes cast down, praying she wouldn't trip. Her heart thudded with each step. She hated being here. The laughter, the stares, the way men's eyes lingered too long, it all made her feel like prey. But her friend had begged her to come, insisting the pay was good for one night of serving drinks. One night, Maria told herself, just one night to bring home a little more money. But fate, as always, had other plans. "Maria!" The voice slurred behind her, thick with alcohol and arrogance. She froze, her tray rattling, as she turned. Adam, her classmate, the one who always leaned too close during lectures, who smirked when she turned down his advances. His shirt was half unbuttoned, his tie hanging loose. His eyes gleamed with mischief and something darker as he grabbed her wrist. "In my place, you can't escape." His grip tightened, pulling her closer. Maria's stomach twisted with disgust. "Adam, let me go," she said firmly, her voice barely audible over the music. He leaned closer, his breath hot with alcohol. "Why? You've been acting too holy in class. Tonight you'll see I always get what I want." Maria jerked her arm, but his grip was iron. Her tray wobbled, glasses clinking dangerously. Panic surged through her. Then a voice cut through the chaos, calm yet lethal. "Let her go." Adam froze. Slowly he turned. Lawrence stood behind him, tall and imposing, his crisp shirt glowing faintly under the club's neon lights. His gray eyes blazed with cold fury, his jaw tight, his presence so commanding that conversations around them faltered. He raised a hand, not striking yet, but the promise of violence lingered in every movement. "She's my girlfriend," Adam lied quickly, his bravado cracking. "We're just talking." Lawrence stepped closer, his voice low, steady, but laced with steel. "If you ever say that again, I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life regretting it. Do you want to try me?" The menace in his tone was enough. Adam's smirk faltered. He released Maria's wrist, muttering something under his breath before storming off, pride bleeding from his posture. Maria stood frozen, her tray trembling in her hands, her breath shallow. Lawrence turned to her, his expression softening, his voice quieter now. "Are you all right?" She nodded quickly, though her heart was pounding so loudly she thought the whole club could hear it. She tried to slip away, but his gaze followed her every step. For the second time he had been her shield, protective, possessive, and though she didn't understand why, she felt her life sinking deeper into his orbit. The night ended with Maria walking out of the club alone, the neon lights fading behind her. But she knew she hadn't walked out untouched. The memory of Lawrence's voice, his cold fury directed at Adam, clung to her skin. The next morning her phone buzzed. "Meet me this afternoon." The message was from Lawrence. Her hands shook as she read it. Every part of her screamed to ignore it, to walk away. But something inside her, a mixture of fear, gratitude, and something she dared not name, pulled her toward him again. When she arrived, he was waiting in a black SUV parked neatly by the roadside. He opened the door without a word. The ride was silent, only the hum of the engine filling the air. Maria hugged her handbag tightly, staring out at the city racing past, the chaos of yellow buses, street vendors waving sachets of water, the bright billboards advertising wealth she could never touch. They drove away from the noise, the streets growing quieter, the houses taller, the gates higher. Banana Island. The SUV stopped in front of a sleek, modern building with glass walls that gleamed under the sun. Maria's stomach tightened. She followed Lawrence inside, her sandals soft against marble floors that smelled faintly of lavender. The elevator ride stretched endlessly, silence pressing against her chest. When the doors opened, they stepped into a wide hallway. Lawrence led her to a door, pulled out a keycard, and unlocked it with a soft beep. Maria stepped inside and gasped. The apartment looked like a dream. Sleek sofas lined in cream leather, a polished glass dining table, curtains heavy and rich, and a queen-sized bed dressed in crisp white sheets. Every piece of furniture gleamed as though it had just been arranged, untouched. The faint scent of newness lingered in the air. Maria froze, hugging her handbag tighter. She felt small, like an imposter in a world not hers. Lawrence turned, his eyes steady, his voice calm but intense. "This is your new home." Her lips parted in shock. "What? No, I can't stay here." "Yes, you can, and you will." His words were firm, not loud, but they left no space for argument. Her stomach twisted. "Why are you doing this?" He stepped closer, his gaze locking onto hers. "Because you need safety, because the world will swallow you if you keep struggling alone, and because I want you safe." Maria shook her head, her voice trembling. "Safe or trapped?" For a moment, silence stretched. His jaw tightened, his eyes unreadable. Then his voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "Name your price, Maria. I don't want you for one night. I want you for as long as you'll stay." Her chest heaved. She wanted to scream, to run, to collapse in his arms, all at once. Instead, she clutched her handbag tighter and shook her head. "This is insane. You can't just decide this for me." His expression softened slightly, but the intensity in his eyes never wavered. "I don't care what you call it, protection, possession, but I won't stand by while you're left vulnerable again. Not after last night." Maria turned away, staring at the glittering city skyline through the window. The view stretched endlessly, towering skyscrapers, the lagoon shimmering in the distance. For the first time in her life, she stood in a place where she could see the city from above. yet she had never felt smaller. "I can't live here for free," she whispered, her voice breaking the silence. "Then call it rent," he replied instantly. "$2,000 a month. Pay me whatever you can." She knew the true cost of this apartment was far beyond her reach, yet she nodded, relief and fear tangled in her chest. "I'll pay," she promised. Lawrence's gaze softened. "That's all I ask." That evening, he came to help her move. He carried her small box of books, her faded clothes folded into a single bag. He placed them gently in the corner of the sleek apartment, his presence filling the space. Maria stood by the door, her arms wrapped around herself. She didn't know if she felt safer now or more caged than ever. Lawrence lingered, watching her quietly. The air between them was heavy, charged with something neither could name. He finally turned toward the door. "You're in my world now," he said softly, almost to himself. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Maria in silence. She looked around at the gleaming apartment, the untouched bed, the polished table, the heavy curtains. It felt like a dream, but dreams, she knew, could just as easily become nightmares. The night air in Lagos was heavy with humidity, the streets half asleep under flickering yellow lights. Maria walked quickly, her books pressed tightly against her chest, her sandals splashing against shallow puddles left by the earlier rain. The road was too quiet, too empty, and each step made her nerves stretch tighter. She should have taken a bus, but she was running late after tutoring and couldn't bear another cramped ride. Her pulse quickened when laughter echoed from a nearby alley. 3 shadows peeled away from the darkness and stepped into her path. Adam. Her stomach sank as his smirk cut through the night. Flanked by 2 men in dark shirts, he moved slowly like a predator circling prey. "Well, well," Adam drawled, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Look who decided to stroll alone tonight." Maria froze, clutching her books so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Please, Adam, just let me pass." "Pass?" he chuckled, stepping closer. "After you embarrassed me at the club? After you had your bodyguard threaten me?" His eyes narrowed. "No, Maria, tonight you pay." One of the men reached for her arm. She jerked back, panic surging. "Stay away from me," Adam sneered. "You've been playing hard to get for too long. You think you're too holy for the rest of us, but I know better." He reached toward her blouse, his fingers curling like claws. Maria's heart hammered. Fear rooted her to the spot. She wanted to scream, but her throat closed. Her father's face flashed in her mind. Her mother's cutting words, the endless weight of survival. She felt small, helpless, cornered. Then a voice cut through the night like a blade. "Didn't I warn you?" Adam's head snapped around. The 2 men turned, startled. From the shadows, Lawrence emerged, tall and sharp in a perfectly tailored black suit. His presence filled the street, commanding, dangerous. His jaw was tight, fists clenched, eyes blazing with cold fury. Maria gasped, relief flooding her trembling body. Adam's bravado faltered, but he tried to hold his ground. "Lawrence!" he sneered, though his voice cracked. "This is none of your business." Lawrence's steps were slow, deliberate. "She's mine to protect. Touch her again, and I'll bury you myself." Before Adam could reply, Lawrence's fist connected with his jaw in a thunderous crack. Adam stumbled back, blood spilling from his lip. The other 2 men lunged, but Lawrence moved like a storm, his punches precise, each blow fueled with rage. One man crumpled against the wall, the other scrambled back, clutching his arm in pain. Maria pressed against the side of a building, her books clutched to her chest, her breath ragged. She watched in shock as Lawrence fought, every strike echoing with a promise. He would not let her fall, no matter what. When Adam hit the ground again, groaning, Lawrence grabbed his collar and shoved him against the wall. "I told you," he snarled, his voice low and lethal. "Stay away from her." Adam spat blood, sneering even through the pain. "You'll regret this. Do you know who my father is? A politician. He'll crush you both." Lawrence's eyes hardened. "Threaten her again, and I'll make sure you rot in jail before your father can lift a finger." He shoved Adam to the ground, stepping back as his men scrambled to drag him away. Silence fell. Maria trembled, her breath shallow, tears spilling down her cheeks. Lawrence turned to her, his chest heaving from the fight. His expression softened instantly when his eyes met hers. "You're safe now," he said gently. Maria shook her head, hugging her books tighter. You can't keep doing this," her voice cracked. "Every time you save me, I feel like I'm sinking deeper into your control." He stepped closer, his hand almost reaching for hers before he stopped. "I'm not controlling you, Maria. I'm protecting you." Her tears burned hotter. "But what's the difference? You fight my battles. You decide where I live. You show up when I can't even breathe on my own. I don't know if you're saving me or caging me." Lawrence's jaw tightened, conflict flickering in his gray eyes. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, but the truth gnawed at him. He was possessive. The thought of her with anyone else twisted him inside out. "But still," he said quietly, "I won't let anyone hurt you. Not ever." Maria turned her face away, unable to answer. The night air pressed cold against her wet cheeks, and the silence between them stretched. Days later, the sky broke open with heavy rain. Students scattered across campus, rushing into shops and lecture halls for shelter. Maria, arms full of books, stepped into the downpour without hesitation. The water drenched her instantly, her dress clinging to her frame as her hair plastered to her cheeks. She clutched her books tightly against her chest, shivering. She didn't care. The rain felt like freedom. Cold, punishing, but real. Cars hissed past, their tires cutting through puddles. Then slowly a sleek, black luxury car rolled to a stop beside her. The tinted window lowered. Lawrence's face appeared, half lit by the dashboard glow. His lips curved into the faintest half smile, his eyes glinting with something between amusement and warning. "Get in," he said simply. Maria froze, raindrops dripping from her lashes. "No, I can't." Her voice shook. "I can't always depend on you." His smirk deepened, though his eyes softened. "Don't be stubborn. You're shivering." She clutched her books tighter. "I don't want to owe you more than I already do." "Then don't call it a favor," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Call it what it is. Protection." Maria's breath caught. Every word from him felt like a chain and a lifeline at the same time. He extended his hand, palm open, steady, his voice lowered, teasing but heavy with meaning. "Beg me to take you home." Her cheeks burned under the rain. For a long moment, she stood frozen, her pride warring with her exhaustion, her fear with her desperate need for shelter. Finally, trembling, she whispered, "Please, take me home, sir." Lawrence's smile softened, almost tender. "That's better." The lock clicked open. Maria slid into the warm leather interior, the scent of his cologne enveloping her instantly. Her books lay damp in her lap, her fingers trembling. The rain pounded against the windows, but inside the silence was deafening. Lawrence didn't look at her as he pulled away from the curb, but his presence filled every corner of the car. Maria sat rigid, her chest heavy. For all her resistance, she couldn't deny the truth. Each time he saved her, each time he reached out his hand, she fell deeper into something she wasn't sure she could escape. Safety or possession, she no longer knew the difference. And yet when she glanced at him through wet lashes, her heart betrayed her. Because she wasn't afraid of him anymore. She was afraid of what she was beginning to feel for him. The house smelled of kerosene and damp clothes. Rain had seeped through the patched roof again, dripping in slow, mocking taps into a plastic basin in the corner. Maria stood by the kitchen door, her chest tight with exhaustion after another long day. The stack of notes Lawrence had given her, money that should have felt like rescue, had only brought more chaos. Her mother's greed grew hungrier with every naira, her demands louder, her contempt sharper. Tonight, the storm finally broke. Maria entered the small sitting room and froze. Her mother stood in the center, sharp-faced and wild-eyed, clutching a bottle of pesticide. The cap was already twisted open, the chemical smell cutting sharply through the air. "If you don't bring more money," her mother screamed, her voice hoarse, "I'll drink this and end everything. I swear it on my life, Maria." Maria's heart stopped. The books in her arms fell to the ground with a soft thud. "Mama, no!" she cried, rushing forward. She fell to her knees, grabbing her mother's arm, her tears spilling instantly. "Please, don't do this." Her mother shook violently, her face twisted with rage and despair. "Do you want to watch me die? Do you want your father to rot useless in that chair while I bury myself alive? Is that what you want for us?" "Mama, please," Maria sobbed, clutching her tighter. The pesticide sloshed inside the bottle, and the sharp scent made her stomach churn. "We'll find another way. I'll work harder. Harder!" Her mother spat, her eyes blazing. "What else do you have to sell, Maria? Your body? Your soul? Because we both know you've already started down that path." The words cut like knives. Maria's sobs shook her entire body, her tears wetting her mother's hand as she begged. In the corner, her father sat silently in his wheelchair, his eyes fixed on the floor. He didn't speak. He didn't move. His silence was louder than the storm raging in the room. "Papa, say something," Maria pleaded, looking at him desperately, but he only clenched his jaw tighter, his eyes refusing to meet hers. Her mother jerked her arm away and raised the bottle higher. "If you don't get 50,000 by next week, Maria, I'll drink this, and you'll have my death on your hands." Maria collapsed fully to the floor, her forehead pressed against her mother's skirt, her voice breaking into gasps. "Please, please, Mama, don't leave me. Don't do this. I'll find it. I swear I'll find the money. Just don't." For a moment, silence hung heavy, broken only by Maria's sobs and the slow drip of water from the roof. Then with a sharp movement, her mother lowered the bottle and slammed it onto the rickety table. Maria flinched, gasping in relief, though her body still trembled. Her mother looked down at her, with eyes filled not with relief but contempt. "You think I'm bluffing? Keep testing me, Maria. One day you'll see me on the floor foaming at the mouth, and you'll know it was your fault." Maria's hands shook as she wiped her tears. Her chest burned, her heart torn between fury and despair. She wanted to scream, to ask why she was the only one carrying this crushing weight, but the words died in her throat. Then her mother's voice dropped, low and cold. "Maybe it's time you knew the truth. Maybe then you'll understand why I can never love you the way you want me to." Maria blinked, confused. "What? Truth?" Her mother's lips curled into a bitter sneer. "You're not even ours." The room seemed to tilt. Maria stumbled back, her hands trembling violently. "What?" she whispered. "You heard me," her mother snapped, her voice rising again. "You're not my daughter. You're not his daughter." She jabbed a finger toward the silent man in the wheelchair. "You don't belong to us. You never did." Maria's breath caught. Her hand flew to her mouth, muffling a broken sob. "Mama, no, that's not true. Please don't say that." Her mother's laugh was harsh, bitter. "True? You think I would suffer like this for a child that isn't mine if it wasn't? We took you in, Maria, out of pity. You were abandoned, left with nothing. We gave you a name, a roof, food in your mouth. And what thanks do we get? You shame us. You bring scandal. You act like you're better than us." Maria's legs buckled, and she stumbled against the wall, clutching her chest as though she could hold her heart together. The revelation shattered her world in one cruel blow. Her father finally lifted his gaze, his eyes filled with a sadness too deep for words. But he said nothing. His silence was confirmation enough. Maria shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "No, no, I am your daughter. You raised me. You can't just say this now." Her mother's face hardened. "Believe what you want, but the truth doesn't change. You don't belong here. You never did. And don't think Lawrence doesn't know it too. Men like him can smell desperation. He doesn't care about you, Maria. He'll use you until you're nothing, then throw you away like the stray you are." The words tore through her like glass. Maria's sobs filled the room, raw and unrestrained. She looked to her father one last time, begging silently for him to contradict it, to save her from this unbearable truth. But he only lowered his head again. Something inside Maria broke. She turned and ran, her footsteps echoing in the small house, her sobs tearing through the humid night air as she burst outside. The rain had started again, cold drops mingling with her tears, but she didn't care. She ran until her legs gave way, collapsing under the weight of betrayal, her cries lost in the storm. Later that night, she sat under the awning of a deserted shop, shivering, drenched, broken. The image of the pesticide bottle haunted her. Her mother's words were playing endlessly in her mind. "You're not even ours." For years, she had carried the weight of being the family's provider, the sacrifice for her father's care, the scapegoat for her mother's bitterness. Now she knew. She had been living a lie all along. And yet, even in her despair, one thought flickered stubbornly in her heart. If she wasn't theirs, then who was she? The Wilson mansion was nothing like Maria had ever seen before. Its ivory columns soared into the night sky, its manicured lawns glistened with dew under carefully arranged garden lights, and the gilded gates whispered wealth in every creak of their hinges. Yet inside the grandeur, Maria's hands shook, as though she were still the frightened girl from the crumbling home in Surulere. The drawing room smelled faintly of lavender and old money. Heavy drapes framed tall windows, and oil paintings of past generations lined the walls. At the center sat Madame Ruth Wilson, her regal posture softened by trembling hands. Pearls glistened at her ears, but her eyes, red and wet, were fixed on the paper in front of her. On the polished mahogany table lay the truth, a DNA test result, its seal broken, the words clear, 99.9% match. Maria stood frozen. Her knees felt too weak to hold her weight. For 20 years she had believed herself unloved, unwanted, misplaced in a family that tolerated her existence. Now, with one slip of paper, the world had spun upside down. Madame Wilson rose, her elegant frame quivering. "Maria!" Her voice cracked on the name. Then she stepped forward, her arms open. Maria's lips parted, but no words came. When their bodies met, Ruth clasped her tightly, holding her as though afraid she might vanish. "My daughter," she whispered, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "I thought I lost you forever. Every day, I prayed for this moment. And now, here you are." Maria clung to her, sobbing into the silk fabric of her gown. "Mother!" she choked. The word felt strange, fragile, yet it carried the weight of everything she had longed for her entire life. Behind them, Lawrence stood near the fireplace. He wore no smile, no smirk, only quiet pride. His gray eyes softened as he watched Maria's trembling shoulders, her world finally beginning to make sense. For the first time, Maria felt what it meant to belong. The following days blurred into a whirlwind. The media was already buzzing, lost Wilson heiress found. High society circles whispered endlessly about the poor girl discovered as the long-lost daughter of the Prime Minister's family. Maria, however, remained quiet, still adjusting. Madame Ruth stayed by her side, showing her family albums, recounting stories of the baby who had been stolen years ago. "You had this necklace," Ruth said one evening, gently touching the familiar pendant that Maria had kept hidden all her life. "I had its twin. Only two exist. That was how I knew." Maria stared at it, her eyes burning. The necklace had always been her only treasure, a trinket she never understood. Now it was proof. In the quiet moments, Lawrence's presence anchored her. He was at the mansion often, standing behind her like a shield when the journalist shouted questions, his hand brushing hers when she grew overwhelmed. Yet he never pushed, never demanded. One evening, after a particularly long day of introductions, fittings, and lessons in etiquette, Maria slipped away to the garden for air. The night was warm, the crickets singing faintly beyond the hedges. Fairy lights had been strung across the trees for an upcoming dinner party, and they cast a soft glow on a gravel path. Maria sighed, hugging her arms around herself. Who am I now, a Wilson heiress? Or still the broken girl from the slums? Her thoughts broke when she saw him. Lawrence stood at the far end of the garden, his tall frame outlined by the shimmer of lights. He wore a tailored navy suit that seemed made for this moment, his expression unreadable yet intent. Maria, he called softly. She walked toward him, her pastel gown brushing the grass. Her heart thudded in her chest. He didn't move until she was just a few steps away. Then, slowly, he dropped to one knee. Maria froze. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. Inside, under the twinkle of the fairy lights, lay a diamond ring that sparkled like a captured star. Her breath caught. Maria, he began, his voice steady but raw with emotion. When I met you, it was chaos. You were desperate, and I was a man who thought love was a myth. I wanted to control everything, maybe even you. But then I watched you. The way you fought for your father, the way you survived betrayal after betrayal, the way you held your dignity when the world wanted to crush it. His eyes glistened as he spoke, never leaving hers. I've built empires. I've made money beyond imagination. But none of it matters. Not without you. You are my strength, Maria, my peace, my future. I will not live without you. Will you marry me? Maria's trembling hands flew to her lips. Tears spilled instantly, her chest heaving as if her heart would break from the weight of it all. For a moment, the garden fell utterly silent. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a sobbed laugh, Maria whispered, "Yes." The word was barely audible, but it was enough. Lawrence slid the ring onto her finger, his hands steady though his heart raced. He rose, pulling her into his arms, and the fairy lights above seemed to blaze brighter, reflecting in her tears. "Yes," she repeated softly against his chest, her arms tightening around him. "Yes, Lawrence. I'll marry you." His lips found her forehead, lingering there with reverence. "You've just made me the happiest man alive," he murmured. Behind them, unseen until now, Madame Wilson stood by the glass doors of the mansion, her hands pressed together in silent gratitude. She had lost a daughter once, but now she had gained both her child and the man who truly loved her. In that moment, under the Lagos sky, Maria realized she was no longer the forgotten girl begging for scraps of love. She was Maria Wilson, beloved daughter, cherished woman, and soon-to-be wife of the man who had broken every wall he once hid behind. The night ended not with champagne or celebration, but with quiet whispers between two hearts in the garden. Maria leaned against him, staring at the diamond now on her finger. "I don't know if I'm ready for all this," she admitted softly. Lawrence smiled faintly, his thumb brushing her hand. "You don't have to be ready for the world. You just have to be ready for me. And I'll be here, always." Her tears fell again, but this time they were not born of pain. They were born of love. And for the first time, Maria believed that destiny had finally chosen her happiness. The morning sun spilled like liquid gold across the Lagos skyline, bouncing off the glass towers of Victoria Island and glimmering over the lagoon. From the wide balcony of their new penthouse, Maria stood barefoot, her flowing silk robe brushing her ankles, the cool breeze lifting strands of her wavy black hair. She gripped the railing, her gaze steady on the endless horizon. It had been months since everything changed. Months since she discovered the truth of her birth, since her world turned from betrayal and cruelty to belonging and love. Now the woman who once scraped coins for bread stood as the recognized daughter of the Wilsons. An heiress, a bride, a woman reborn. Behind her, the sliding doors opened softly. Lawrence stepped out, tall and commanding in his casual morning shirt, coffee mug in hand. His gray eyes found her instantly. He didn't speak at first, just watched her with that quiet intensity she had come to know so well. "You've been out here since dawn," he finally said, his voice low. Maria smiled faintly. "I like the mornings here. They remind me that everything really happened, that it wasn't just a dream. Lawrence set his coffee aside and moved closer, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned into him, letting his warmth shield her from the wind. "It was never a dream," he murmured against her ear. "It was hell and heaven, but we survived it." Maria closed her eyes, her chest tightening with memory. Images flashed in her mind. The locked door at Round Garden, her mother's cruel eyes, Adam's threats, the revelation that she had never belonged to the James family. And then the moments that saved her, the DNA results, Ruth Wilson's arms around her, and Lawrence kneeling under the fairy lights with a ring that promised forever. "Yes," she whispered, "we survived." Their wedding had been nothing short of a spectacle. The most powerful families in Lagos and beyond had gathered under crystal chandeliers, the aisle lined with roses, the air heavy with perfume and whispered awe. Yet for Maria, the grandeur had blurred into insignificance. All she had seen was Lawrence waiting at the altar, his eyes burning with certainty. When the priest asked for vows, Lawrence's voice had been steady. "You are my heart, Maria, my strength, my peace. I will love you until my last breath." And she had answered with tears glistening on her cheeks. "You showed me I was worth loving. You are my home, Lawrence, forever." Now, weeks later, memory of that day still pulsed through her like a second heartbeat. Downstairs, the penthouse hummed with quiet life. The staff moved discreetly, preparing breakfast. On the marble counter sat a small bouquet of lilies, Lawrence's habit of leaving fresh flowers for her each morning. Maria turned from the balcony and walked inside, her bare feet soft against the polished floor. She paused by the dining table, her eyes falling on the morning papers. The headlines screamed of politics, business mergers, and celebrity scandals. But one headline caught her eye. From forgotten girl to heiress bride, the Wilson daughters' new life. Maria's stomach tightened. She still wasn't used to the constant gaze of the world. Every move she made seemed to ripple across society pages. Every smile, every step beside Lawrence was analyzed, praised, or criticized. She picked up the paper, her hand trembling. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever just be Maria again. Not Maria Wilson, not the heiress, just me." Lawrence, who had followed her inside, tilted her chin up gently. "You'll always be Maria. The girl who fought for her father, who refused to be broken. That's the woman I fell in love with, and no headline can change that." Her chest warmed at his words, the doubt easing. She leaned up and kissed him softly, grateful for the grounding presence he always gave. Later that afternoon, they drove to the Wilson mansion. The estate glowed in the late sunlight, fountains spraying arcs of silver, the gardens fragrant with jasmine. Inside, Madame Ruth was waiting in the sitting room, her face radiant with joy. "My daughter," she greeted warmly, pulling Maria into an embrace. "You look more like your father every day. He would have been so proud." Maria's throat tightened. She had never met the man Ruth spoke of, the prime minister who had passed years ago, but she carried his blood. "I hope I make him proud," she whispered. "You already have," Ruth said firmly. Zoe entered then, her steps hesitant. For weeks after the revelation, her eyes had burned with jealousy, but slowly she had come to accept Maria as her sister. That day she smiled faintly, a fragile but genuine gesture. "You're glowing, Maria. Married life suits you." Maria returned the smile. "Sisterhood suits me too." For a moment, warmth lingered between them, the bond of family finally beginning to heal. That evening, as the city lights flickered awake beyond the mansion windows, Maria and Lawrence slipped away to the garden. The same garden where he had once dropped to his knee under fairy lights. The same garden where she had whispered yes with trembling hands. They sat on a stone bench, the night breeze cool against their faces. Lawrence's arm rested along the back, his fingers brushing her shoulder absent-mindedly. "Maria," he said suddenly, his tone thoughtful, "do you ever regret it? Meeting me the way you did? That wrong number call?" She laughed softly, shaking her head. "At first, yes. I thought it was the worst mistake of my life. But now? She turned to him, her eyes shining. Now I think it was fate. That call saved me. You saved me. Lawrence's lips curved into a rare, unguarded smile. And you saved me too. I never believed in love. I thought it was weakness. Then you came crashing into my world, and suddenly weakness was the only strength I wanted. Her chest swelled with emotion. She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. Then let's never forget it. The pain, the trials, all of it, it led us here. He kissed her hair softly, whispering, "Here is where I want to stay. Always." When they returned to the penthouse later that night, the city below sparkled like a sea of diamonds. Maria stood once more at the balcony, gazing out, her heart finally calm. For years she had begged for love, for safety, for a place where she belonged. Now she had all of it. A mother who cherished her, a family that finally accepted her, and a man who loved her fiercely. Not for what she had, but for who she was. The storms were not forgotten. They had scarred her, shaped her, but they had also delivered her to this moment. A new morning, a new life, a new name carried with dignity. King. She turned back into the penthouse where Lawrence waited with that familiar, patient smile. Their eyes met, and the world outside ceased to matter. Maria walked toward him, her steps steady. For the first time in her life, she wasn't walking into uncertainty or fear. She was walking into love. And as his arms wrapped around her, she knew the truth. The forgotten girl was gone. The lost child was found. And in her place stood Maria Wilson, beloved daughter, cherished wife, and a woman who had finally come home.